Greetings, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another edition of Classic Album War. Today we're going to look at two longtime favorites from the early 70s. One from 1970, the other from 3 years later, 1973. One, a innovative, influential release straight out of Woodstock Nation, okay? One of the first ever kind of Latin rock explosion bands, okay? And pretty unique band when you think of it, not a lot like them. The other, both California bands, okay? One from the San Francisco area, all right? And one from just up the coast a little ways in San Jose, all right? We're talking about Santana Abraxas and the Doobie Brothers, The Captain and Me, okay? For one band, it's their second release. Follows their self-titled debut. For the other, it's their third release. Okay? Comes hot on the heels of Toulouse Street, another classic from the band. So, we've got a poll running on the Facebook page, and pretty hotly contested right now. Santana's a little bit ahead, right? A lot of people commenting like, oh, but God, these bands are so different. Yeah, they are. Well, you know what? This band is so different. Who are you going to compare these guys to, right? There's really no one that matches up with Santana for the most part. So, but they're contemporaries. They both come out of California. They both kind of burst on the scene right around the same time. So why not put them against each other, right? Two fan favorites. Two probably their best albums. Okay, so let's start with one, the earlier one from 1970. So notable for, of course, the band is named after their guitar player and leader, Carlos Santana. Okay, Mexican-American guitar player. Fantastic. All right. Got a whole bunch of great musicians in the band at the time. Most notably, you got a very young drummer named Michael Shreve, who, of course, will go on to do lots of great things. You got congas and timbales, drums, bass, Hammond organ. Greg Raleigh on the Hammond organ, also on vocals. All right. Later to go on to form Journey with Neil Schon, a young guitar player who would join Santana shortly after the release of this album, right? So what do we got on here? And by the way, this sold, I believe, the sales of this album to date are somewhere around 5 million, so it was a hefty seller, especially here in North America. Okay, Singing Winds, Crying Beasts kicks it all off. A very cool instrumental with some singing guitar from Carlos Santana. That goes into Black Magic Woman, Gypsy Queen, of course, which of course is a cover of Fleetwood Mac, Peter Green's song. Okay, from Fleetwood Mac, a Fleetwood Mac album that came out roughly about a year before this one came out, if that, right? So they remade that song very shortly after. Much bigger hit for Santana, okay? Oye Como Va, another hit on this album. Okay, this is where the kind of Latin flavors really come into play. Incident at Neshabar, however they say that, a sizzling instrumental, probably the heaviest tune on the album, okay? Great guitar work on there. Tons of grooves. The whole album is just full of those amazing Latin grooves. Se Acabó, another kind of heavy rocker, right? Mother's Daughter, gorgeous tune. Samba Pati, another just real beautiful song. This is an instrumental. Carlos's guitar singing all over the place. Hope You're Feeling Better, great Raleigh vocal, kind of funky, kind of heavy, right? And then El Nicoya to kind of end off the album, percussion heaven, right? A fantastic album. Fantastic album. Not a weak song on it. Not a weak song on it, okay? Beloved by fans and critics alike, right? So, fast forward 3 years, The Captain and Me from the Doobie Brothers, okay? These guys started out kind of like as almost like a, biker band. Their first album had that biker band look, but a lot of folky stuff going on in the first album. Second album, Toulouse Street, man, they're really hitting their stride right there. A lot of great hits on that album. Listen to the Music is on that album, one of everybody's favorite song by the Doobie Brothers. But then they would come out with this gem, produced by Ted Templeman, okay, who also would produce Montrose's debut right around the same time, and of course would go on to even more fame, producing those first couple of Van Halen albums. So what do we got on here? We've got, kicks off with Natural Thing, a great kind of rootsy pop rocker, right, with a just addicting little guitar hook there. Long Train Running, my all-time favorite Doobie Brothers song. Just a great kind of funky hard rocker. It's just addicting as all hell. China Grove, heavy tune, okay? Real rock and really upbeat, lots of grooves going. The bluesy, dark-eyed Cajun Woman, okay? Great lead vocals and co-lead guitars throughout this whole album from Tom Johnson and Patrick Simmons. Both fine guitar players, both really fine vocalists, and they kind of share. Tom does most of the vocals on here, but you got a couple also from Patrick. Where do we leave off? Clear as the Driven Snow. Another one of my favorite tunes off this album. That's kind of folky, kind of mysterious. A lot of, lyrics about the horrors of drugs and all that kind of stuff, but a really kind of mystical, folky piece. Really, really underrated song on this album. And then The Heavy Without You. Great heavy rock tune. The Doobie Brothers could rock as hard as anybody back then. They could still do it today. By the way, if you haven't seen either of these bands live today, they still kick ass live, all right? But I digress. Without You's just got some great riffs and sizzling solos, and another unsung song of this album. Then you move on to Southside Midnight Lady, another great tune, more of a rootsy tune, kind of like with a country flavor, right? Patrick Simmons on the vocals. Well sung, okay? Just a really nice tune. That, I think, kind of bridged the gap to the Blackwater tune that Patrick also sang. You can kind of put those two together. They're almost like brother and sister. Then you've got the quick but heavy Evil Woman, kind of like a psychedelic hard rock tune. Lots of crazy guitar solos on that. Busted Down Around O'Connelly Corners is a brief little acoustic guitar instrumental, courtesy of Pat Simmons. Then you've got Ukiah, great tune. Okay, and then it finishes all off with the title track, The Captain and Me, more of kind of like a folky pop tune, really, really nice. Again, that kind of like mystical quality that a lot of the early Doobie Brothers acoustic songs had. So really well done. So what do I think here? If we would have had this conversation about 5 years ago, all right, I would have easily said this, because I've been actually listening to this album most of my life. Okay, I'm 53, easily the last 40 years, right, or so, give or take a year or two, I've been listening to and loving this album, and I do love it. Love the cover, the production's great, the songs are great, the playing is great, it's innovative as all hell. However, over the last bunch of years, probably the last handful of years, I've always loved the Doobie Brothers, and I've always loved all their albums. I don't know what it is, but the last 5 years, I think it started when I've seen the Doobie Brothers live a lot over the last 10 years, and they always put on such a great performance. I think as I've gotten older, I've really grown to appreciate the music of this band, specifically those early albums. I would say these days I listen to this a hell of a lot more, maybe because I've heard this so much, and while I love this album, I'm going to give the slight edge to The Captain and Me, because I'm on a Captain and Me high for the last 3, 4, 5 years. I really have been. This is just this is like a near perfect album. You know what? They're both perfect albums for me. There's really not a weak song on either one of these albums, in my opinion. Some of you may say, top to bottom a little bit stronger here, maybe one or two kind of mediocre tracks here. I don't feel that way. I find the Captain. You know what I like about The Captain and Me? There's so much variety on here. Okay, you've got some heavy rockers. You got a couple kind of like cool pop tunes. You got a couple really nice folk rockers. All right, a little bit of psychedelia. It's got a lot of everything, which I really like. But I really like this a lot too. So I'm going to give this one a squeaking split decision win. Okay, 116, 114, 115, 113. 115, 114, the winner by split decision. The Doobie Brothers, The Captain and Me. But you know what? This one is nearly just as good in my book. I love them both. I love them both pretty much equally. But I'm going to play the hot hand now, because in the last bunch of years, I've just been listening to and loving this a little bit more. And that's what happens, A couple of years from now, and I could be, you know what? I go on a ridiculous Santana binge for a couple of years, and actually a couple of years ago I was listening to Santana constantly. But you know how it goes, right? Your stuff kind of ebbs and flows a little bit. So you can't go wrong with either album. They're both legendary. They're both classic. They're both very different. Okay, we've already established that they're both very different. It's not; these are not meant to be absolute perfect matchups. It's just two contemporary bands. Okay, both California. Late 60s, early 70s phenoms that came out and just hit it real big with their eclectic sounds. Both amazing, both well worth your time. If you haven't listened to either or, what the hell are you waiting for? All right. Each one would go on to produce right before it and after it a handful of just amazing, legendary albums. So Santana, the Doobie Brothers, both classic albums in today's war. I give the Doobie Brothers ever so slightly the win, but neither one is a loser because they're both amazing albums. I love them both to death. So visit us on the web at www.catranquility.org. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. Of course, we're here on YouTube every single day. I want to thank Mr. Jeff Young for appearing on yesterday's show, adding his insights to the Montrose versus Boston Classic Album War. If you missed it, get into our playlist. Check it out, all right? It was just posted yesterday. That was a lot of fun. We talk about those two classic debut albums. We hope to have Jeff on the show again in the not-too-distant future. Meanwhile, do not miss this coming Tuesday. I will be on Jeff Young's Music Without Boundaries, 7:11 Eastern Standard Time, 4:11 Pacific Time, or whatever time it is where you are. Don't forget to listen in. We are going to do part 2 of Jeff's Underrated Guitar Heroes theme. Okay, and I'm taking part in part 2. I'm looking forward to this. So do not miss that. Visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook. Go and vote for these two today. We're on Twitter as well. And, of course, like I said, we're here on YouTube often. So hope to get to a questions and answers show this weekend. I also have, hopefully today, if not today, tomorrow, I'm going to do that long-awaited Forgotten Favorite show. I've got a whole stack of stuff to talk about. I've also got a new product show coming up momentarily, so don't miss that. We'll see you real soon, guys. Bye-bye.